morning. How's everybody doing? Great to be learning with you on a Tuesday, Yom Shlishi, and Rosh Chodesh, welcoming the new Hebrew month of Adar. When Adar comes in, our joy increases. It's the month of joy because it's the month that contains Purim. Let's light up the darkness. Who's in the house on a Tuesday? Rosh Chodesh Adar. Yehud in South Carolina, Joe in the Inland Empire, Shandor in the Bronx, Melissa in Great Neck, Nancy, North Carolina, Bella in Florida, Sharon in New Jersey. Okay, what's going on the YouTube side? Where's the comments that I can't see? Because it's like every day I do exactly the same thing and it produces different results. I don't know why. Okay. So I'm just not seeing the comments, which I know are there over on the YouTube side. I'm gonna all messages are visible, and I'm just gonna reload that one time, and then if I don't see them, I don't see them. I apologize. I don't know why I don't see them. Welcome everybody. I'm sorry, I'm not welcoming the people on the YouTube side. Something was a little screwy today. Oh, I see why. Okay. I'm in the wrong video. There we go. Moishi in Brooklyn. Hi, I'm in Florida. Frank in San Pedro. Lester in Florida. Elle in Southern California. And Lynn in Canada. Welcome, everybody. And Annette in Fort Lauderdale. That's a new name. Welcome, Annette. Also, Guy in Dayton. Okay, starting a new chapter here in Tractate Menachot, the 30th volume of the Talmud. Now opening chapter 4, Mishnah number 1 on page 38. We'll do a double today. Which is good because we are on time, but we're going to get behind next week because on Sunday we won't have class. We'll have class Motzi Shabbos this Saturday night. And then on Sunday we'll be off, and then we'll be off for a week while I go to Israel for the Israeli premiere, February 24th at the Menachem Begin Center in Jerusalem. And then we also have screenings in Netanya on the 25th, Gush Etzion on the 26th, another one in Jerusalem on the 27th. Possibly some events on that Sunday. And then I'm going to get back basically just in time for Purim. I think I get back on March 2nd. I'm not even going to commit to a class on March 2nd because that's going to be an insane day. So we'll be off for like 9 days starting on Sunday. And we'll put that, as always, on the Facebook page. More immediate, tomorrow night's class is going to be 1 hour later than usual. Got an event here in our neighborhood that I must attend. So tomorrow's class, 1 hour later than usual, 7 p.m. Pacific. And we'll put that on the Facebook page as well. Okay. So tomorrow, 1 hour late. The rest of the week, normal through Saturday night. And then next week, we're going to be off while I'm in Israel. So I think we're going to be able to do a couple of doubles this week. Maybe more, and so get a little bit ahead so we won't fall too far behind. And we've been as much as 2 weeks behind, and we make it up, we catch up, won't be a problem. Okay, so page 38, Mishnah number 1 of chapter 4. And chapter 3, especially that Mishnah number 10, we were talking about if all the elements of mitzvah aren't present, so you're not doing anything, right? So if any of the letters are missing in a mezuzah scroll, the fact that all the other letters are there doesn't mean that you're able to perform the mitzvah of mezuzah with what's there. It's disqualified. tzitzis, right? So if we wear a four-cornered garment, there has to be the ritual fringes, 4 of them, 1 on each corner. If you lose one, you're not doing the mitzvah of tzitzis with the other 3 fringes that remain. Now we're going to look at the flip side of this principle. There are some mitzvahs where you are doing it with each individual element of it. And so if one of them is missing, then you're still performing a mitzvah with the remaining elements. And so interestingly, while you must have 4 fringes on a garment to be doing tzitzis, when you actually look in each tzitzis, right? So right here, and we'll get into this momentarily, but I've got 2 examples here of an arba kanfot. So this is what you would wear. Some people wear it over their shirt. This is the wool kind. There's also a less fancy cotton kind. But this is, a 4-cornered garment that is made for the purpose of wearing tzitzis. You see there's the hole, so a person could put it on like that. I'm wearing one under my shirt. That's why I'm not going to put this over it. But at each corner, right, you have the fringes. This is a tzitzis, right, and it's made out of 4 strings that are doubled over into 8, and then tied with a very specific set of knots. And then, as we'll see, there are different customs about how the knots and loops are arranged, but there definitely have to be 4 of these tzitzis on the corners of the garment for you to be fulfilling the mitzvah of tzitzis. But on each tzitzis, do you have to have all 8 strings? Do you have to have all of the knots, right? And as we'll see, so this is basically the same kind of garment, also with 4 tzitzis, but here we have the tekhelet, right? The sky blue wool is, 1 string is the sky blue wool, and that is mixed in with the other white strings, right? So we read, right, that in the Torah, in the Shema, that spoke Hashem to Moses, saying, speak to the children of Israel and say, put a fringe on the corners of your garment throughout your generations, put a blue thread in the fringe, so that whenever you look at the fringe, you're reminded of all my commandments. So it's definitely a Torah commandment to put the blue string in, specifically the tekhelet blue, that specific kind of blue. So how could you have a kosher garment that doesn't have the blue string? And basically, just as a history lesson, at a certain point, the blue dye, which is a very specific blue dye, became prohibitively expensive, unavailable to the average Jew. And so the sages said, you don't have to have it. How could you be fulfilling the mitzvah if you don't have the sky blue string in it? Today we'll see that this is in the category of you can perform the mitzvah with the white strings even in the absence of the blue string. So you were fulfilling the mitzvah of tzitzis even with only the white strings if you don't have the blue strings. And that's the way it was done for many centuries. Only in modern times, according to some opinions, and definitely not according to all opinions, we have rediscovered the correct kind of sea snail from which that ink was made to create the tekhelet. Some people think we have rediscovered it, and so this is kosher, and you can have the blue string. Others say no. Chabad rabbis generally do not have the blue string in theirs. Their custom is we've gone to white and we stay with white only. Some people, and this is in the Orthodox world, that there is this division in the modern world of whether we've discovered the blue or not, and can we wear the blue. I'm following the opinion of the people who say that we have rediscovered the blue, because I love when I, repeat this commandment every day in the Shema to have the blue. And now it's possible to have the blue, at least according to some, highly reputable, reliable opinions, that the blue has been rediscovered. I'm personally partial to having the blue. The tzitzis that I wear under my shirt right now, you see in the kind of everyday type of garment, actually doesn't have it. I only have the white strings on that. But on my talis, right, on my prayer shawl, I do have the blue strings like this. Okay, let's get into this. Mishnah number 1 here of chapter 4. Mishnah 1. The absence of the tekhelet strings does not prevent fulfillment of the mitzvah of tzitzit with the white strings. Getting right to it. And the absence of the white strings does not prevent fulfillment of the mitzvah with the tekhelet strings. If one has only one, he wears it without the other. Of course, ideally you have both, but if you only have one, you can wear it without the others and be fulfilling the mitzvah of that part of the general mitzvah. Absence of the tefillin of the arm does not prevent fulfillment of the mitzvah of the tefillin of the head, right? We've seen we have tefillin on the head, tefillin on the arm. If any letter is missing from the scrolls inside the tefillin is not fit. But if you don't have the arm tefillin entirely, you still can wear the head tefillin and vice versa. Absence of the tefillin of the arm does not prevent fulfillment of the mitzvah of the tefillin of the head, and the absence of the tefillin of the head does not prevent fulfillment of the mitzvah of the tefillin of the arm. If a person has only one, he dons it without the other. That's the Mishnah. Now the Gemara. The Gemara suggests, let us say that the Mishnah is not in accordance with the opinion of Rebbe, as it is taught in a Baraisa when the verse requires one to place white and tekhelet strings upon the corners of his garments, and then states in the Torah at Numbers 15:39 that you may look upon it, singular. It teaches that the lack of either one prevents fulfillment of the mitzvah with the other. This is the statement of Rebbe. But the rabbis, the majority who overrule Rebbe, say the lack of one does not prevent fulfillment of the mitzvah with the other. So the Gemara asks, what is the reasoning of Rebbe? How does he derive his ruling from this verse? So, as it is written, and they shall put on the fringe of the corner a sky blue, a tekhelet thread. The fringe of the corner, this is a reference to strings that are of the same type as the corner of the garment. Since garments are usually white, at least in the ancient world, this phrase is referring to the white strings. And it is written in the same verse, a sky blue thread. So therefore, you need both, according to Rebbe. And the merciful one states in the following verse, referring to both types of strings, and it shall be to you for a fringe that you may look upon it in the singular. So Rebbe reads that as it's this combination of the white and blue strings that form the mitzvah. So you're looking at it, and if either part is missing, it is not there, and you wouldn't be fulfilling your obligation, right? According to Rebbe, this teaches that one does not fulfill his obligation until both types are present together. So, of course, the Gemara asks, okay, that seems like a reasonable argument from Rebbe, and how do the rabbis who hold that one can fulfill one obligation without the other understand this verse? And the Gemara answers, they hold that the phrase that you may look upon it indicates that one fulfills a mitzvah with each one individually. There's a mitzvah with the white strings, and there's a mitzvah with the tekhelet string. So the Gemara concludes its initial suggestion. Shall we say that the Mishnah, which states that one can fulfill the mitzvah with either white or sky blue strings, even in the absence of the other, is therefore not in accordance with the opinion of Rebbe? But Rav Yehuda said that Rav said, you may even say that the Mishnah is in accordance with the opinion of Rebbe, and the ruling of the Mishnah is necessary only with regard to granting precedence. The white strings should precede the blue strings, but if the order is reversed, one still fulfills the mitzvah. And this is as it is taught in a Baraisa. It is a mitzvah to insert the white strings into the garment before inserting the sky blue strings. But if one inserted the sky blue strings before the white strings, he has fulfilled his obligation, but omitted the mitzvah. He could have done it better. And the Gemara asks, what does the Baraisa mean by the phrase omitted the mitzvah? Now we're on 38b. If we say that the individual omitted the mitzvah of white strings and fulfilled only the mitzvah of sky blue strings, how is this possible? Aren't both there? It's just a question of which one did we put in first. According to the opinion of Rebbe, the absence of either one prevents the fulfillment of the mitzvah with the other, and therefore in this case, one would not fulfill any mitzvah at all. How can you say he fulfilled his obligation but omitted a mitzvah according to Rebbe? So the Gemara answers that Rav Yehuda said that Rav said it means that he omitted a mitzvah but nevertheless performed a mitzvah. And what does it mean that he omitted a mitzvah? It means that he did not perform the mitzvah in the optimal manner, right? So lechatchila, in the first place, the way you should have done it is like this, but bediavad, after the fact, if you did it that other way, it's still valid, right? We see that formulation all the time. And here, it means that he did not perform the mitzvah in the optimal manner because he did not insert the white strings first, but he did fulfill the mitzvah of tzitzit. So the Gemara asks, this works out well with regard to the Mishna's statement that the absence of the white strings does not prevent fulfillment of the mitzvah with the blue strings, which has been interpreted to mean that failing to insert the white strings before the blue strings does not invalidate the tzitzit. But what is the meaning of the Mishna's statement that the absence of the blue strings does not prevent fulfillment of the mitzvah with the white strings? And Rami Bar Chama said that statement of the Mishnah is necessary only in the case of a garment that consists entirely of a sky blue wool. In such a case, one would be supposed to insert the blue strings first to match the garment and only add the white strings afterward, which would be an exceptional situation only because the garment is blue. Since these garments are typically white, you start with the white strings. The Gemara notes that this was also stated by Amoraim, the sages of the Gemara. Levi said to Shmuel, Arioch, do not sit on your feet until you explain to me this matter. When the Mishnah states that the absence of the tekhelet does not prevent fulfillment of the mitzvah with the white strings, and the absence of the white strings does not prevent fulfillment of the mitzvah with the tekhelet, the sky blue strings, what does it mean? Shmuel said to Levi, the statement is necessary only in the case of a linen cloak on which one places tzitzit, where there is a mitzvah to insert the white strings first. Why? What is the reason for this? The verse states, and they shall put on the fringe of the corner a sky blue thread. The fringe of the corner is a reference to the string that is the same type as the corner of the garment. So in the case of a linen cloak, which is generally white, this is a reference to the white strings. And since the verse mentions the fringe of the corner before the sky blue thread, the white strings must be inserted before the sky blue strings. And note, the tzitzis are made of wool. This is a linen cloak. You can have linen and wool together when the wool is tzitzis on a linen cloak. Otherwise, you can't. Now, the Mishnah therefore teaches that if one inserted the sky blue strings before the white strings, we have no problem with it after the fact, and the tzitzis are valid. It just would have been better to add white strings to the typical garment first and then the blue afterward. The Gemara asks, this works out well with regard to the Mishnah's statement that the absence of the white strings does not prevent fulfillment of the mitzvah with the blue strings. But what is the meaning of the Mishnah's statement that the absence of the blue strings does not prevent fulfillment of the mitzvah with the white strings? And Rami Bar Chama said to him, that statement of the Mishnah is necessary only in the case of a garment that consists entirely of blue wool, where it is a mitzvah to insert the blue strings first, as the phrase, the fringe of the corner, indicates that the first strings that one inserts into the garment are those that are of the same type as the corner of the garment. And the Mishnah therefore teaches that if one inserted the white strings first, we have no problem with it after the fact. He has still fulfilled the obligation of tzitzis. Rava said, is it actually the color of the garment that determines the proper order in which one should insert the strings? Rather, Rava said the ruling of the Mishnah is necessary only for a case of severed strings, strings that frayed or broke or were cut. And the Mishnah teaches that if the sky blue strings were severed and the white ones remain, or the white strings were severed and the sky blue strings remain, we have no problem with it in the sense that the tzitzis are still fit. Now that's the importance here, as opposed to in the last Mishnah of chapter 3, right? Where if you've got this four-cornered garment, right, that is going to have four, right? I mean, if I unfolded it, but the camera has a limited range, right? Right, so we four-cornered garment, okay? So when we inspect all four corners, that's why it's, folded for convenience. Just to remind us, right? So here are the four tzitzis, right? For the four corners of this garment. If one of these is missing, then this garment does not have tzitzis on it, and we are not fulfilling the mitzvah of tzitzis. But if within an individual tzitzis, some of these strings are frayed or broken, then this still counts as a tzitzis until, there's a certain point where there's just not enough here left to fulfill the mitzvah. But as long as you've got some part of this tzitzis, we're going to call it a tzitzis. It's not going to be optimal unless the strings are the right length and all of them are present and the knots are correct, etc. But we can, it's still going to count a pretty long way into it. Right? So if, for example, the blue strings here were severed, but the white strings were complete, then this still would be a tzitzis, and this would be a fit garment with tzitzis on it. Where severed? Severed strings. Okay, as the sons of Rabbi Chia say, severed white or sky blue strings are fit. And similarly, severed hyssop branches are fit for sprinkling the water purification that are mixed with the ashes of the red heifer. So the Gemara asks, okay, severed still works, but there has to be something there. So what's the minimum measure, right? So the Gemara asks, what measure do severed strings need to be in order to remain fit? So Bar Hamduri says that Shmuel says the strings must remain long enough to tie them in a slip knot. A dilemma was raised before the sages when Shmuel says that severed strings must still be long enough to tie them in a slip knot. Does that mean to tie all the strings together in a slip knot? Or perhaps the strings may be even shorter, provided they're long enough to tie each one individually as a slip knot. Teku, that question will remain unresolved. It was never answered. Rav Ashi asks, if the strings are thick and cannot be tied in a slip knot, but if they were the same length but thin, they could be tied in a slip knot, then what is the status? And Rav Acha, the son of Rava, said to Rav Ashi, if the strings are long enough to be fit if they are thin, all the more so they are fit if they are thick, as the mitzvah one fulfills with them is more recognizable with thicker strings. Right? So there you go. Thicker strings, longer strings, better, because the tzitzis are meant to remind you of all the mitzvahs that we're obligated in. So the more clearly visible they are, the better. Some people take this a long way. Some people wear very long tzitzis and outside their clothing. Some people just have it on their body, know they have it on their body, but don't wear them out. I don't I'm not entirely consistent on that. I normally will wear my tzitzis tucked in, but I know it's better if I have them out so that I'm seeing them more. And so sometimes I do wear them out. Some guys only wear them out. But don't necessarily have very long tzitzis. Some guys only wear them out and have really long tzitzis. So there's different customs in different communities. Right. So the Gemara cited the opinion of Rebbe, who holds that one cannot fulfill the mitzvah of tzitzis without both white and blue strings. And the Gemara explained that the Mishnah can be interpreted in accordance with his opinion, which said that you can fulfill the mitzvah if you have only white or only blue. So how are we going to say that the Mishnah could be interpreted as being consistent with Rebbe's opinion? Seems to be the opposite of his opinion. So the Gemara now asks, who is the Tana who disagrees with Rebbe and holds that the blue strings and the white strings are not interdependent. And the Gemara answer, in other words, who authored the Mishnah that is supposedly the law according to the majority? Who actually authored it? So the Gemara answers, it is this following Tana, as it is taught in a Baraisa. Rabbi Yitzchak says in the name of Rabbi Nassan, who said in the name of Rabbi Yosef HaGalili, who said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, if one does not have blue strings, he nevertheless affixes white strings, right? That's certainly where the law ended up, because, like we said, we didn't have the blue strings for centuries, and we continued to wear tzitzis. So Rava said, learn from the sons of Rabbi Chia that one is required to tie a knot after each and every set of windings, and one cannot suffice with only one knot at the end of all the windings, as if it enters your mind to say that one is not required to tie a knot after each set of windings, then that which the sons of Rabbi Chia say, severed white or blue strings are fit, and similarly severed hyssop branches are fit, would be difficult, because once the uppermost knot is undone, all of the windings on the entire corner will come undone, as there are no other knots holding the windings in place. And in that case, the garment will not have valid tzitzis. And the Gemara actually rejects this proof. Now we're on top of 39a. Perhaps the sons of Rabbi Chia were referring to a case where one tied knots between the sets of windings, even though there is no obligation to do so. Now, this is a pretty standard tying of the tzitzis. Even if we were just, and I know my camera is just not going to be able to focus so you can really see this clearly, and you can see this knot at the end is a little bit loose. If I was going to put this on, I would tighten that. All right, that final knot, make sure that's tight. But you basically have, it attaches to the garment, and then you have, two like regular simple knots, and then the windings, which I think are 7, 9. There's different ways to count this, and I know that the knots and the windings add up to is it to 613? That I'm not prepared to talk about right now. Because what I wanted to say right in here is that even though this is a very standard kind of knotting and winding for tzitzis, here it's actually a little bit different. This is more Chabad style, where you can see that there's additional knots worked into every loop to keep them in place. But then there's completely different systems, Yemenite winding, Rambam winding, Ravid winding, Gira, Sefer Chachinuk, Rav Amran HaGaon. There's like really totally different systems for tying all the knots and loops in tzitzis. So you just have to know what is the custom in your community when you're ordering your tzitzis from a reputable store. I usually get mine from Ben's Talit shop. I order them. It's in Israel, in Jerusalem, but I order it and it comes in the mail to me here. Okay. Where am I? Okay, so at 39a. And Rabbah says, learn from it that the uppermost knot in the tzitzis is required by Torah law, as if it enters your mind to say that it is by rabbinic law, whereas by Torah law it is sufficient to merely insert the strings in the hole without tying any knots, then for what reason was it necessary for the Torah to permit placing wool tzitzis in a linen cloak? If you weren't tying it, there would be no permanent attachment, and it wouldn't be even a shot in its question. Right? You can't wear wool and linen together. Well, it's allowable for tzitzis. It wouldn't be allowable for any other kind of combination of these fibers in a garment that we wear. But if they weren't tied, it wouldn't matter, because you can lay a linen cloak on top of a wool cloak. They haven't become one cloak. If you just insert strings in a hole but don't tie them there, they haven't become part of the garment, right? It is obvious that it is permitted, since if one attaches a swatch of wool and a swatch of linen with a single connection, it's not considered a connection at all with regard to the prohibition against shotnets. So rather learn from it that the uppermost knot is required by Torah law, which attaches in a permanent way the tzitzis to the garment. Rav Ada says that Rav says if a string was severed at its base, i.e. where it is connected to the garment, the tzitzis are unfit. And Rav Nachman said in the study hall and stated this law. Rav raised an objection to Rav Nachman from a baraisa. In what case is this statement said, i.e. that there is a minimum length required for the strings? That is only when the strings are initially affixed to the garment. But in the end, after the strings are affixed in an acceptable manner, its remainder and its severed strings are fit at any length. Right? So as long as the strings are there, if they start to get frayed and some of it falls off, it definitely becomes suboptimal. But as long as you've got a knot and some remainder of the strings there, it might well be fit. Again, we believe in hadar mitzvah, beautifying the mitzvah. So when our tzitzis start to fray and the knots start to come undone, even though it might still technically be fit, we're going to replace that and have, nice, well-tied, beautiful tzitzis. Right? Here where the law ended up. In the halacha, right? If even one of the tzitzis was severed at its base, where the strings are inserted into the garment, then the tzitzis are unfit, right? So where it's actually, because there it's severed. Okay, so that's not something whether we get, right? So right here, if there was a severing of the string here at this stage where it attaches to the garment, then it becomes unfit. But if all this length got cut off, like up to here, and I think even if this knot started to get undone, then this would still be technically fit, but we'd want to replace it. Now the Gemara clarifies what is its remainder and what are its severed strings and what is it not. Now when the Baraisa mentions its remainder, it is referring to a case where parts of the strings were severed and parts of them remain. And when the Baraisa mentions its severed strings, it is referring to a case where the strings were completely severed, and nevertheless the strings are fit for the mitzvah. And the Gemara responds to Rava's objection. No, the Tana of the Baraisa is teaching one law, and the Baraisa should be understood as follows. The remainder of its severed strings are fit at any length, meaning the ends, not where it attaches to the garment. And the Gemara asks, if so, let the Baraisa simply say its severed strings are fit at any length. Why do I need the mention of its remainder? This teaches us that we require a remainder of the severed strings long enough to wrap them around the other strings and tie them in a slip knot. Right. Let's think about something. As opposed to so much of the previous two tractates of Zevachim and the earlier parts of Menachos, right, when we were talking about bringing offerings in the temple, and it was a very beautiful material to study, right? But it was mitzvahs that we haven't been able to perform in thousands of years. Tzitzis is something that we're performing on a daily basis throughout the Jewish world now. So these halachas are very well worked out in a practical manner. And so I will remind us, we don't paskin halacha from the Gemara, right? So what we read here, maybe or maybe not, ended up being the law as it stands today. So if you have a question about tzitzis, ask your local Orthodox rabbi. And when you're purchasing your tzitzis, as long as you're purchasing from a reputable tzitzis, talis, Judaica type of store, you should be covered. And it's beautiful to learn this, right? But don't look to me to tell you, exactly what exceptions are okay or not okay in your tzitzis. I'm not a rabbi, and we're just doing our best to understand what's being taught in the Gemara. But actual practical questions about tzitzis, right? Go to a rabbi and who's an expert in this field and get an answer from him. Because this is a big and extensively, written about field. Okay. Needs a slip knot. Okay. Rabbah sat in the study hall and said in the name of Rav, the string used for winding around the other strings is counted in the quota of the tzitzis. In other words, it is one of the 8 strings on each corner, and there is no need to have an additional string for winding, right? And you see that here. The blue actually just helps make it a little bit easier to see, right? In this case, the blue is the one that is used to wrap around all the other ones, right? So when they would make this, they would leave the blue really long so that it could wrap around all the other ones, and the knots would be tied with it and then wrap, etc., etc., etc. Okay? Rav Yosef said to Rabba, Shmuel said it, and not Rav. This was also stated by another Amora. Rabba Bar Hana says that Rabbi Yoshia of Usha told me that the string used for winding around the other strings is counted in the quota of the tzitzis. Rav sat in the study hall and said in the name of Shmuel, if one wound the majority of the white and blue strings, instead of leaving the larger portion of the strings hanging loose beyond the windings, the ritual fringes, the tzitzis, would nevertheless be fit. It was kind of all knots and not enough loose string. It would still be fit. Rav Yosef said to Rava, Rav said that, not Shmuel, right? Get your quoting correct, one sage is saying to another. Not your quota, you're quoting, right? The law that you're quoting in the name of another sage, make sure that you have that chain of who learned it from who correct. The Gemara supports Rav Yosef's version from that which was also stated. Rav Huna bar Rav Yehuda says that Rav Sheshes says that Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba says that Rav says, if one wound the majority of the white and the sky blue strings, the tzitzis are nevertheless fit. Rav Chia, the son of Rav Nassan, teaches this discussion like this. Rav Huna says that Rav Sheshes says that Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba says that Rav says, if one wound the majority of the white and the blue strings, the tzitzis are nevertheless fit. And even if you wound only one set of windings, the tzitzis are fit. Now here's where we have mostly long string and only a little bit of knots. It's still going to work. But the finest way to affix the white and blue strings is to ensure that 1/3 of the length of the strings is windings and 2/3 are loose hanging strings. We have, I think, a little bit more. I would, the knots and loops, ideally 1/3 and the rest is 2/3. But I would say that here, right, it's maybe a little bit closer to the knots and loops are 1/4 and the rest of it is 3/4, right? And sometimes it's longer than that. So according to this opinion, 1/3, I'm off the end there, right? So 1/3 loops and knots, 2/3 loose strings. I would say mine is a little bit more like 1/4 and 3/4, but that is okay. The Gemara asks, and what is the measure of a set of windings? It is taught in Baraisa that Rebbe says it is such that one winds once and winds a second and a third time, i.e. each set must contain at least 3 windings. It was taught one who minimizes the set of windings, or loops, may not have fewer than 7 sets, and one who adds to this number of sets may not have more than 13 sets of windings. And the Gemara provides explanations for these guidelines. One who minimizes the set of windings may not wind fewer than 7, corresponding to the 7 firmaments. And one who adds to this number of sets may not wind more than 13 sets of loops, corresponding to the 7 firmaments and the 6 air spaces between them. And it was taught when one begins to form the windings, he begins winding with a white string. And this is because the verse indicates that one first inserts the fringe of the corner, i.e. the white strings, which are the same type as we discussed earlier as the corner of the garment. And when he concludes the windings, he concludes with a white string. In accordance with the principle, one elevates to a higher level in matters of sanctity and does not downgrade. Since he started with white, he ends with white. Now, the Gemara relates that Rav and Rabba Bar Chana were sitting together, and a certain man was passing by wearing a cloak that was made entirely of sky blue wool, tekhelet, on which he had affixed white and blue strings. Now on page 39b. And the tzitzis were composed entirely of windings without any portion of the strings hanging loose. So Rav said, the cloak is beautiful, but the white and blue strings are not beautiful. Rabbi Bar Chana said the cloak is beautiful, and the white and blue strings are also beautiful. So the Gemara asks, with regard to what principle do they disagree? The Gemara answers, Rabbi Bar Chana holds that since it is written in one verse, you shall prepare yourself twisted cords, Deuteronomy 22:12, and in another it is written, and they shall put on the fringe of the corner a sky blue thread. It teaches that the tzitzis may be composed entirely of either twisted cords, i.e. windings, or loose threads or strings. And Rav holds that actually we also require loose strings in addition to the windings. And when that term twisted cords appears in the verse, it comes for the purpose of teaching the number of strings that are required. If the verse would have employed the singular term twisted cord, it would indicate that 2 strings are required, as twisted means that 2 strings are wound around each other. Once the verse uses the plural term twisted cords, it thereby indicates that 4 strings are required, and that's what we do. By using the terms twisted cords and thread, the verse indicates form twisted cords with 4 strings that one attaches to each corner and let the strings hang loose from them. Next topic. Shmuel says in the name of Levi, wool strings exempt a garment made of linen, i.e., one fulfills the mitzvah by affixing wool strings to a linen garment, right? We've alluded to this a few times already. Normally you can't wear wool and linen together, but you can attach wool tzitzis to a linen garment as long as it is a 4-cornered garment. A dilemma was raised before the sages. What is the law with regard to whether strings made of linen exempt a garment made of wool? So one can say that it is only wool strings that exempt a garment of linen, since the sky blue string, which must be wool, exempts a linen garment. White strings of wool also exempt the garment. But if one affixes linen strings to a wool garment, he does not fulfill his obligation. Or perhaps, since it is written, you shall not wear diverse kinds, right, shatnez, wool and linen together, you shall prepare yourself twisted cords upon the 4 corners of your covering in Deuteronomy 22, verses 11 and 12, which indicates that one may wear wool and linen together in order to fulfill the mitzvah of tzitzis. So perhaps there is no difference whether one affixes wool strings to a linen garment, and no difference if he affixes linen strings to a wool garment. And the Gemara suggests, come in here, a resolution to this dilemma. As Rahava says that Rabbi Yehuda says, wool strings exempt a garment of linen, strings of linen exempt a garment made of wool, and strings of wool and linen exempt a garment in any case, i.e. all garments, and even garments made from silks. And the Gemara notes, and this last point disagrees with the ruling of Rav Nachman, as Rav Nachman says that shira'in, silk, are exempt from the obligation of tzitzis. And Rav raised an objection to the opinion of Rav Nachman, from the following Baraisa: garments made from types of silks known as shira'in, kalach, and serikin all require tzitzis. And the Gemara answers, the Baraisa means that there is an obligation by rabbinic law to wear tzitzis on silk garments if they have corners, whereas Rav Nachman meant that they are exempt by Torah law. Now the Gemara challenges this suggestion. If that is so, then say the latter clause of the Baraisa, and with regard to all these garments, strings of wool and linen exempt them. This indicates that one may affix wool tekhelet and white linen strings together. Granted, if you say that the obligation of tzitzis for silk garments is by Torah law, that is why diverse kinds are permitted for them. But if you say that the obligation is by rabbinic law, how could diverse kinds be permitted for them? And the Gemara answers, say instead either wool or linen strings exempt silk garments, but one may not affix both wool and linen strings to the same silk garment. And the Gemara comments, so too it is reasonable to assume that this is the correct interpretation of the Baraisa. As the Baraisa teaches in the latter clause, strings made from these silk fabrics exempt a garment of their type, but do not exempt a garment that is not of their type. So granted, if you say that the obligation to attach tzitzis to these garments is by rabbinic law, that is why they are exempted if one affixes strings of their type. But if you say that the obligation is by Torah law, then it should be only wool or linen that exempt these garments. But the Gemara rejects this kind of reasoning. If it is due to that reason, there is no conclusive argument because one can maintain that the other fabrics also fulfill the obligation of tzitzis by Torah law in accordance with the opinion of Rava, as Rava raises a contradiction. It is written in one verse, and they shall put on the fringe of the corner a sky blue thread, Numbers 15:38, and the term the corner indicates that the fringe must be from the same type of fabric as the corner of the garment that it's on. And yet it is written wool and linen in Deuteronomy 22:11, immediately before the verse states, you shall prepare yourself twisted cords upon the four corners of your covering, indicating that tzitzis must be from either wool or linen. How so? Strings made of wool or linen exempt any garment, whether the garment is made of their type of fabric or whether it is not their type of fabric. Strings made of all other types of fabric exempt garments made of their type of fabric. For example, silk strings exempt a silk garment, but they do not exempt a garment made from a fabric that is not made of silk. Now, the Gemara notes, and Rav Nachman, who holds that silk garments do not require tzitzis by Torah law, holds in accordance with the ruling stated by a Tan of the school of Rabbi Yishmael. I'm almost done. Questions or comments, please get them in now. As a Tana of the school of Rabbi Yishmael taught, since the word garments is usually stated in the Torah without specification as to the material from which the garments are made, and the verse specified in one of its references to garments that it is referring to a garment, to garments made from wool or linen, as it states, and the garment in which there will be a mark of tsaras, that skin condition, or a garment can also get tsaras, right? We've seen that. Garments and houses can, manifest these markings known as tsaras, just like a human person can on his skin. And the garment in which there will be a mark of tsaras, whether it be a woolen garment or a linen garment, in Leviticus 13:47, from this it may be derived that so too, all garments mentioned in the Torah are those made from wool or linen. Other fabrics are not classified as garments by Torah law. Consequently, when the Torah requires strings on the corners of garments, it is referring specifically to garments made of wool or linen, according to this view. Abaye said this statement by a Tan of the school of Rabbi Yishmael diverges from another statement made by a Tan of the school of Rabbi Yishmael, who holds that all fabrics are considered garments. As a Tan of the school of Rabbi Yishmael taught, from the fact that the verse states a woolen garment, I have derived only that a garment of wool can become tameh. From where is it derived that garments made of camel's hair or rabbit's wool, goat's hair, or the types of silk, kalak, serikin, or shirayin, are also included in this law? So the same verse states, or a linen garment. The word or here serves not just to connect us to linen, but as an amplification to include all types of fabric. Okay, that's what I've got for us today. Reminder, tomorrow's class, 1 hour later than usual, 7 p.m. Pacific, tomorrow, Wednesday. The rest of the week will be normal, and then we'll have a class Saturday night, and then we're not going to have a class for 9 days after that while I'm in Israel for the premiere screenings of Guns N' Moses there. I do hope to post and share a little bit about that journey on Facebook and Instagram while I'm away, but I'm not going to have a chance to teach the class while I am there. I know I'm going to be running hard all day, every day. So I'm not seeing questions right now. I'm going to just double check. Looks like people are having a conversation with each other, right? But not asking questions. Is that what's going on? Michael, does rabbinic law override Torah law? No. quite the contrary. Torah law is sacred forever, and we're not going to have a rabbinic law that is in that contradicts, or conflicts with Torah law. Rabbinic laws are passed to protect us from coming to violate Torah laws, right? So rabbinic ordinances are generally a fence around the Torah to make sure that we don't come by accident or carelessness to violate a Torah law. The reason that they want to make a distinction is because one of the most important differences between Torah law and rabbinic law is that when it's a Torah law, if there's a case of doubt, we rule stringently. When it comes to a rabbinic law, if there's a case of doubt, we rule leniently. That's an important difference between rabbinic law and Torah law. Okay, that's what I've got for us today. With God's help, see you tomorrow, 1 hour later than usual, 7 p.m. Pacific tomorrow, Wednesday. All the best.